And I didn't print those minutes. So can you, is it the top of page 2 that changes?
Yes.
Okay. There's one small,
Okay.
there's one small correction.
Okay, you want it.
It's not on median of mine either.
Here, let me know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
How about now?
Did you get a wrist? Oh, there we go. Okay, we're good to go?
Yes.
Okay, I call this meeting of the Budget Committee to order. First, we'll begin with introductions, starting with the City Council, then the Budget Committee members, and then staff. So, who wants to start?
Counselor Desi Nicodemus.
Counselor Elisa Beatty.
Counselor Adam Khosrabadi.
And I'm Leslie Schachner, citizen member.
David Cheatzazon, citizen member.
Mary Rowe, citizen member.
John Stahl, citizen member.
Michael Osborne, Assistant Finance Director.
And Ann Ober, city manager.
Thank you all. Next item on the agenda is to approve the minutes of the August 8th, 2022 committee meeting. Does anyone have any corrections or comments on the minutes?
I do have one minor correction. It's at the top of page 2 of the minutes. It's where we're talking about the parks project, and it says Ober clarified that if council decides to proceed with parks, there will be 2 options. The first, a fee that would increase property taxes and would be a ballot measure levy. The second is a climate fee that would be levied on the utility bill. We need to strike the word climate. That is not, we were talking about parks funding. The climate fee is an entirely separate thing. And so we just need to strike the word climate there.
Okay. Any other edits or comments? If not, I will entertain a motion to approve the meeting minutes as amended.
I'll move to approve the meeting minutes with striking the word climate in the top of the second page.
I second it.
Okay. It's been moved and seconded to approve the minutes from the August 8th, 2022 Budget Committee meeting. Is there any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Say nay. The minutes passed. Motion carries. At this time, we will open the meeting to any community members that would like to discuss any city business with the committee. Those wishing to speak that are not in City Hall, please email finance@milwaukieoregon.gov or raise your hand in Zoom. We don't have anybody in Zoom,
Don't have
right?
anybody in Zoom.
Okay. So we don't, I'm assuming we don't have any citizen members here to speak tonight? Okay. Then we'll move on to the city manager update.
Hi, we have a number of projects that are currently ongoing here at the city that I just wanted to give a brief update on. The first is that the 7 acres apartments are nearing completion. So those are the ones that previously had been called the Monroe Apartments. That means that the first section of the Monroe Greenway is actually about to be constructed. So they have marked out the section that'll be the new bikeway. They've also installed the sidewalks on site. So we're expecting that in the next couple months. We're really excited. I've gotten a couple of phone calls asking about the triangle park that's on the edge of that property. The way it is designed, we are supposed to be putting 3 dogwoods and 2 benches back into that site, and that is a requirement of the approval. So we'll be double checking and making sure those are installed. If anybody's wondering, they can reach out to me directly. We also have a couple of big projects downtown. We have the refurbishment of the new city hall. So we have just selected a vendor in order to start the final construction designs and then the actual construction at that site. We're really excited, and I just want to call out the team that's been working on that. So thank you to Kelly Brooks, Kelly Tucker, and Mandy Bird. We really could not have done it. And I'm sure there are others who have been doing a lot of work on that, but it's a really exciting project, and we are on schedule to be moving into the site next September. That leaves this building vacant. So we actually have also gone through the bid process, and we'll be announcing the bidder next week. But we'll be working with council on that still, and then we'll be announcing the final user of this property and working on an agreement for the use of this property. So thank you to Joseph on that front. We have a couple of big projects that are nearing completion. So Wood and Home are expected to be done in December. That is actually on schedule. I've heard a couple of times that individuals feel like that's later than we had stated. It's actually in the contract is the completion date. So that is currently on schedule. And I think those are the major big pieces. I do want to talk about a couple of changes we've had here at the city. So the first one is actually, I'm guessing you're noticing that there is someone missing from this dais today. That is that Bonnie Dennis has resigned from the city. She has moved to Colorado. I'm going to miss her terribly. She has been an incredible gift to the city. I've loved working with her, and I keep hoping that one day she'll come back to Oregon. But for now, this is what's right for her and her family. So I'm over the moon for her. I think it's wonderful. We are doing interviews this week. So our hope is that we will have someone in this position soon. I just have to call out Michael Osborne, who's been an absolute gift. So many of you have worked with him for years on the budget committee, but he came to the city about 4 months ago, and has just been doing an incredible job, both in leadership for the team, but also in terms of our financials. We've been incredibly lucky to have him. So thank you for everything, Michael. And then the other ones that you may not have heard about, we have a new library director. Brent is at the library. He's been there for a couple months. He is rapidly doing some new hires at the library, and we're really excited about the team he's putting together.
And what's his name?
Brent Husher. BRENTHUSHER.
That's a great name for a library.
It is. Well, and he has a lot of energy. And so I'm sure that at times, as we all do, get shushed by other people, but he's incredible. He's got such a vibrancy and excitement about the work he's doing around strategic planning and the direction of the city is taking the library. So I'm just really excited to have him on this team as well. I think those are the big ones on the director level. Are there any questions that anyone has or anything you want to talk about tonight?
I do. I have for years been thinking about and am now raising the issue that I don't understand the tax increment financing. I don't understand how that works. I actually think that you had a presentation from somebody at the state the first meeting I was at, but you know what? I just didn't absorb it. I'm wondering if there are some materials. I know there's a lot of new people here too. If there's some materials you can provide us or, suggestions of how to understand how that actually works.
I would recommend two things. One is that I'm going to send out the link if Michael can help me track it down. It was a budget committee meeting. I believe we were filming those meetings at the time. But if not, and actually I think we filmed that one in particular because it was an outside individual who we thought would be useful for the public to see and better understand. We also can have a conversation with the state about having them come back and also just providing any resources that they think would be helpful.
Okay, I think for me, that would be very helpful.
I think it would be helpful for all of us. So it's always a good refresher, and there are unique.
Well, it's complex. I mean, that's what I remember from it was that it's really complex. Okay.
We do have new council members who are going to be starting. So we do not have the final vote counts. We're expecting those in the next week. But we know that Rebecca Stavignard will be a new council member for us. It also looks like Robert Massey will also be a new council member for us. So along those same lines, we'll be working on a financial training.
Oh, okay.
And rather than doing it just for a couple of council members, Michael and I were actually talking about coming in and doing a training for everyone for a couple hours, just spending one of our quarterly meetings, going over sort of the details and getting everybody comfortable with the documents. So we'll be in touch sometime in the next couple months about what that looks like, but it'll definitely before we ask anybody to go into the budget process.
Okay, great, perfect. Thank you very much. Anybody else have any questions, comments? Okay, the next item on the agenda is the new climate fee. Natalie Rangers, come forward. Uh-huh.
Make this special for me. Hi, everyone. My name is Natalie. I'm the Climate and Natural Resources Manager here at the city. Just a little background. I actually started in October 2018, right after the adoption of our climate action plan. So it's been I just hit my 4th year, technically. And just feels like a blink. So today I'm here because tomorrow we're going to City Council to talk about a new fee on utility bills of residents and businesses, essentially every utility customer. And the idea behind this fee is to secure funding for the continuation and potential expansion of our climate work here at the city. I like to define climate work as hitting many kind of lenses, many projects and programs. For our purposes, our climate, okay.
Thank you.
Of course. Perfect, thanks. So for our purposes, our climate work, though, is most easily defined by our climate action plan. So I gave you a copy of the executive summary of our climate action plan. I would note in there that the dates for our goal timelines have been accelerated by 5 years, and that's from a climate emergency declaration from City Council back in 2020. So it's actually by 2030, 2035, and 2045. But you can see there, it's a list of a lot of different programs, incentives, advocacy efforts related to building energy, land use, transportation, with the idea of becoming a carbon-free community by 2045. And these were adopted by City Council in 2018. And that's what I've been working on within Public Works. So this climate fee, really what it is our climate goal was a City Council goal. And City Council goals change over time. And we heard direction from City Council for the renewal of the goal to pursue permanent funding opportunities. So the funding that we're looking at for a climate fee is in order to support the existing programs that we are currently offer related to those actions and strategies, as well as seeing if there's new ones that our community would find advantageous. So that would be things like, for example, more natural resources programs for private property where there's not a dedicated funding source for, or, renewable energy programs or projects in the community, which we wouldn't otherwise have the funding to support. So I'm here today. Tomorrow we'll be having a longer conversation with City Council. Things that might be a little bit new in that conversation are things around like fee reduction opportunities, potential.
What reduction?
Fee reduction. So if somebody wanted to, for example, if they installed solar on their home already, they could potentially get a fee reduction. So creating a process for that through our city code, which this fee would be based in. The fee itself is modeled kind of using the SSMP, the Streets and Surface Maintenance Program fee structure. So that's kind of, if some of those terms sound unfamiliar, they were unfamiliar to me just a few months ago, but essentially it's by land use assigning a fee for a billing unit. And what we did for the climate fee in particular is we actually tailored it so that way the largest greenhouse gas emitters in the community, mostly being large commercial industrial, have the highest fee per billing unit when compared to residential. And that's because there's that proportion of emissions. But all of this is going to City Council. This is all draft right now. And so I'm definitely welcome anyone who's listening online, anyone today who would like to submit testimony to participate in that conversation. But in the meantime, if you have any questions, I'm here to answer them.
Is the Is what is occurring tomorrow a discussion only, or will there be some action?
Yeah, so we're bringing an ordinance and draft code. So city council could choose to adopt it at that time. They could choose to continue the discussion. We're kind of prepared for both options.
Okay, thank you.
Do we have any idea if the utility ratepayers are supportive of this?
Yeah, so for the engagement that we've been looking at, we've been mostly focusing, so there's an engaged survey available, and that survey was focused towards what programs folks would be interested in order to really gauge that question of, are we providing the services that the community wants when it comes to some of these programs? Because of the short timeline, honestly, of when kind of we were directed in order to look at this and when staff had capacity in order to actually lift this code, we weren't able to do as much direct engagement as we would have otherwise hoped to do. So that's definitely part of this conversation that we've been having. I will say that, definitely in the new year, regardless of if this is adopted or not, I'm sure there will be more engagement to be had. Of course, engagement itself calls on a large draw for some staff resources. So it's definitely going to be a balance of priorities. And that's one of the things that we would seek council direction on, is kind of how would you like to support that work?
Second question would be, if you start collecting this money, how do you evaluate whether you're actually buying anything with it?
That's a good question. So, when the climate action plan was adopted, metrics were established for each of these strategies and actions on how we were going to essentially track our progress. One of the things coming out of it are kind of regular reports out to council. So I usually go to council about once a quarter in order to give updates on how these programs are going. One thing that will be in their hands by the end of the year, as well as posted for the community read, is kind of now it would be a 4-year update on what programs have been lifted, what metrics are associated. It's very unique to each program. So I hate to kind of give absolutes for each of these. But, that's definitely a direction from council that we could receive, which is, if we're going to be supporting some of these programs, we want this explicit reporting coming out of it.
Thank you, Natalie.
Of course, yeah. Any other questions?
I just want to make a comment, not so much a question, but based on one of the comments that council has gotten for tomorrow's meeting, I just wanted to emphasize, I think maybe we haven't blown our own horn enough about the things that have been accomplished under Natalie in the last 3 years, because someone reading the survey online commented that it looked like the city was putting everything on the citizens and the city wasn't looking at city operations, and that couldn't be further from the truth. Natalie's done a lot of work on city operations. She has some good news to share about going all renewable on our electric next year, and the city's been, has bought electric vehicles, looking at installing charging stations, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of work that's been done there, and I do feel like, somebody reading that survey I understand why the person who commented that felt that way, and that we need to, say a little bit more about what the city has already done. But that piece of reaching out to citizens for the things that citizens can do, residents can do, is, that is more staff work intensive quite often. And that's sort of one of the reasons we're looking at a fee to be able to expand that capacity, both cover Natalie's work, but also expand that capacity.
Yeah, sometimes when it comes to some of the programs we offer, there's often a challenge when it comes to programs that are explicitly focused on private property. And that's because a lot of the rules that we have around things like public utility dollars mean that it should only be spent on public infrastructure. So some of these programs that would really kind of help us achieve our climate goals, it would provide incentives, education, outreach. but maybe it's more specific to that private property side. So that's hopefully a gap that we're trying to address in this new fee, which will be about $2.13 a month. And that wouldn't apply to low-income utility members who are part of the low-income utility assistance. And then, of course, like I mentioned, there would be things like fee reduction possibilities. I know I did receive some feedback today for somebody who was, concerned because they're like, oh, we already installed solar and EV chargers at home. And I was like, well, would be a perfect situation in which a fee reduction could be possible. So, yeah.
So is there any data, is there any compilation of how much money is going to be raised and how it's going to be allocated, what the procedures are for that allocation?
Yeah, so right now we receive direction from City Council about $500,000 a year would be that balance that we would hope to raise. For allocation, that would be part of that. Sorry.
That's based on the number of households and businesses, right?
So how it would go is we would have kind of a goal fund of 500,000. And then what we would do is we look at the different land use types and we say these land use types are more intensive when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions than these land use types. So maybe industrial compared to, a small business. Small retail. And then for different land use types, which we say land use because that's how it's baked in the SSMP, but for different kind of utility customers who fit that land use type, they then would essentially, we'd say 500,000, say, and I'm making these numbers up and I don't have the code. So like 35% is, the industrial customers, 20%
35%
of the fund will be paid by industrial customers because, say, in our community emissions as a whole, using some recent models that are available, we can say about 35% of community emissions come from industrial customers. So that's kind of how we would then say, okay, well, if we have 500,000, 35% of that should be paid by utility customers. Now we split it up among the number of billing units that we know are available for utility customers. So that's how each billing unit kind of gets a fee associated.
PGE customers.
So it'd be our utility customers as water, sewer.
Water, you're only using Milwaukee's.
Yep, because that's what we have information on, data on, and that's kind of the accounts that we can control, so to speak. It's also tied to our low-income utility assistance program. So that's how we would be able to know who can potentially get a fee waiver because they are qualified. They already went through an application process. So it would be, per customer. For example, a residential home is one billing unit, right? So that would be like $2.13 for a residential single dwelling unit. But then for a, say, large retail customer, it might be, and of course, this is off the top of my head, and I would need to reference the code. It could be something like number of employees or number of parking spots, something specific to that land use.
Those haven't actually been tied down yet as to what.
It's in the code that we've proposed. That's in our council packet for Tuesday. That code will have a breakdown of what percentage each kind of land use type would pay, as well as the dollar amount per billing fee. You can see on the handout that I actually gave you, you'll see the cost per billing unit. What I can't tell you is how many billing units each utility customer has, just because I'm not privy to that information.
Okay. I have history with the sewer negotiations some years ago, which in the development of that program, the large businesses were actually given a break, and the residential customers as a whole ended up paying a whole lot more. So I am interested in knowing that there is a clearly delineated process for assigning the costs, and that citizens don't end up paying bigger as they did then.
So the community members at this point are paying $1 to $2. So it's going to be a very small rate for the households, but we'll send everyone on the budget committee information with the spreadsheet on it, just so that you can look at it as well.
I'm just raising that as as one of the things to keep in mind when you start telling people what's going on, that history is there.
Yeah, and thanks to that, thanks to the work that y'all have done, honestly, it allows us then to base these new fees on existing rates that are already calculated in some of those existing concerns around making sure that households were paying a disproportionately lower share of that comparative.
And I would say, in addition to the packet, tomorrow's packet, which is enormous, there's, at the top of the staff report, it gives you links to the past meetings. So there've been a couple of work sessions where
It's been worked out.
yeah, so you might want to look at those packets as well, because they probably have some background.
I love it. No, I appreciate you sharing. I think these are important questions. It's why we wanted to have Natalie come talk tonight.
I appreciate it.
Of
very
course.
much.
Of course, yeah.
Any other questions? Everybody okay?
And Chair, before we proceed, I realize that there is another funding measure that I didn't talk about. So before we leave the funding measures in my time, may I just give you a quick update on a different item?
Okay.
During your budget process, you all approved us doing a transportation bond. And you also approved acting as, or the council did, acting as the Urban Renewal Board, a future letting of debt for the urban renewal. We are working on that debt. We're going to be presenting it tomorrow night to council, and we're going to have our financial advisors with us presenting that content. If anyone's interested, we would encourage you to tune in tomorrow night just to hear more about the information on where we're at. It's $24 million worth of debt. It's a 20-year age range, and then it is for around 4-ish%. So that's where we're at today. But if you have specific questions, Michael or I can answer them tonight, or you can talk to us in advance of the meeting tomorrow night. And this was in the budget. So this is more of an update on where we already approved things, but we wanted to make sure you were aware.
Well, I mean, it was in the budget that we would be doing it, but the amounts and things like that were not.
Correct. It is in the CIP though. So we calculated out the 5-year CIP. The 3 years of CIP are what are in this debt. So it's all the projects are in years 1, 2, or 3, or in the urban renewal plan that we presented. I'm looking at Michael to make sure I got that right. Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Appreciate that update. So I guess if nobody else has any questions, thank you very much.
Of course, yeah. And I'm happy to, if Ann wants to pass along my contact info in case anyone else has any questions, I can happy to answer them.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Okay, now I think Michael is on with the review of our quarterly report.
Yes, I just wanted to say that today is my 4-month anniversary here. It seems like it's been 4 years. But I've enjoyed it, and it's been great to be here. So it's funny how in 6 months I've changed sides of the table.
Slightly different perspective, huh?
Slightly different perspective.
Well, I will comment that we usually get copies of this. So I hope that, I mean, I looked at it online, but I always count on having the paper copy, so.
We can make some copies right now. Would you like
Yeah.
us to?
I guess, because I didn't bring a device, so,
Perfect.
yeah.
Happy to. Anyone else want a copy?
Well, I always want a copy.
Okay, we'll get 3 copies.
I mean, I have a copy. You guys
Okay.
took care of it.
David and Leslie should have a copy.
Yeah.
2 more. I'll be right back.
All right. Should I jump in or should we wait?
Okay. With you jumping in.
Yeah, I'm okay with you jumping.
Okay. So we're here looking at the first quarter financials for fiscal year 23-24. And some of the highlights that we have are the total fund balance in quarter 1 fiscal year 2023 is now 52.3 million, a slight decrease of 5.5 million from the previous quarter. That is somewhat comparable to previous periods during that time. Another aspect is the average interest paid on the LGIP increased to 1.84% as of September 30th. that's, when we budgeted, it was a slightly lower number that we budgeted for. But as of June 2022, the rate was 0.93%. So there's been a lot of influx in that rate during the last couple months. You'll see some impacts in that as we go forward, but I'm just bringing it up to everyone's attention.
So I wanted to ask about that.
Yeah.
I noticed, you said in there something about expecting it to go down or something. And I was trying to understand how that's tied to our overall, what the Fed is doing with interest rates. Does that relate in any way to
Doesn't really relate.
It
It's
doesn't,
just
okay.
the interest rate that we're getting on that money that's being used by the banking industry. And we budgeted, I believe, we tried to be safe at a 1% interest rate that we were going to get. But as of June, it was 0.93, which was under. So in our budgeting, we weren't getting as much money, interest income, as we thought we would.
But now we're getting more.
Now we're getting more. I think we just checked and it was 2.85% before I came up this morning. So there's huge volatilities in it. And some of it may be due to Fed rates and everything that's going on in the markets. But I'm just letting you know that as of the end of the fiscal year, it was a lot lower. And from what I've seen, this is kind of unprecedented a little bit, but things are trending on the upward.
Lisa, from when I researched that municipal bank, their rates are set based on what their investments are bringing in. So it's not, they don't change it based on CPI, they change it based on what they are actually able to invest in, and the rates are going up.
Okay.
Okay. Also, the state gas tax revenue this quarter was $409,000, which is a slight decrease of 3% from the previous quarter. A couple things to keep in note is that there's a 2-month lag with how we record the gas tax. And I think that was the big one. And then also I wanted to bring up to date that the city is currently in progress of our annual audit. And there's 2 forms in that. And we did the first form of it earlier in September, which is just go over procedures and everything. And December 12th, they're coming out to start the next phase of the audit. And that should be completed in January. We filed an extension, so we're still within our timelines, but they're just going to be starting on December 12th.
So in that part where you were talking about the audit in there, and I don't have the text, but then you talk about the PAFR, and it wasn't clear to me whether you were saying the PAFR will be done in January too, or whether you were saying the PAFR was already done, but I looked on our website and I didn't see it on our website, so I gather it's not already done.
It's not already done. It will be done after the audit in January.
Okay.
I can get you a specific timeline.
Well, no, that's not necessary. I just was a little confused by the way it was worded. I did notice, though, while looking at the website, that we have this page on there called financial forecasts, and we haven't updated it. I mean, the last one was to 2020.
Okay.
So, I mean, I don't remember talking about financial forecasts lately. I remember talking about it in my early years on council, but maybe it's something we should talk about at one of our upcoming meetings.
Yeah, I can look into it and update it.
Okay.
It seems like we do a 5-year financial forecast every time we budget.
We do a budget, yeah. Well, it looks like they haven't been put on that.
It's part of the budget. It's one of the elements that goes into the planning.
But maybe it's just that our website needs the updates, but yeah,
I'll look into that and
Okay.
update it.
thank you.
So something else of note, compliments to Bonnie that we received the Triple Crown Award in financial documents again this year for ACFR, EFAR, and the Budget Award. I'm still learning all the acronyms. Which shows is total credit to all the work Bonnie did in the past and how good a shape everything is. So that's, kudos to her. Property taxes. We had a 3% increase in property tax in fiscal year 2022. I had the number in front of me. I apologize of what the total amount was, but it was apologize, I don't have that in front of me, but it was a 3% increase. I can get the total for you.
I think it's on page 3. It says fiscal year 2022 assessed property values increased from 2.362 to 03648 to 2,433,4915, was a $71 million increase.
Yeah,
That's in the values.
That's the assessed value. I was trying to find the total property tax collected, but I can get that number. But on the next 2 pages are the graphs that we've gone through in the past with real market value versus assessed market value, which is just showing our trend of 3% increase, whereas the real assessed market value is going up a little higher, but I have a feeling that since June, it might have taken a little dip. Also then on the next page is property tax collected versus our operating costs, which you can see the property tax collected is kind of fixed at 3% increase, but the operating costs, there's a bit of a jump over the years, which are increasing greater. The next thing page is utility fees.
Before we move on, I was just curious, can we break out the amount of incremental property tax that we're getting from all this development? Like we got the Monroe Street apartments or whatever they're called now, the little housing areas that have developed over the last 3 or 4 years. I'm just kind of curious about that.
I think it's possible for us to break some of it out for the larger developments.
Right.
I can't guarantee I can do it for the smaller, like ADUs and stuff, which will change some of the property values.
Right. I wouldn't.
But you're looking for the larger?
Right. I'm just curious.
But maybe, or just new construction, is that what you're talking about?
Oh, the major new construction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what's interesting about Michael saying that we have a 3% increase. I mean, that's the statutory increase, right? That's the statutory limit. But you would think, given how much new construction we have, we'd seen a little bit more than 3%.
Well, you look at the building inspection file.
Yeah.
We just work.
We did. It was 3.9%.
Oh, okay.
So we did see over the 3% during the last, with the new construction in the new year. Sorry, I wasn't in here for the conversation. But we also have a large amount of the new larger construction is in urban renewal. So it's getting captured into a separate pot. So it's just going to take us a little bit of time to make sure that we accurately reflect both what's inside and outside of urban renewal to get you that sense. But we have seen an increase from our larger developments.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Next page is utility fees. I just wanted to highlight here the 4-month plus past due is down 30% from 450,000 down to 246,000. Over the course of the year, we've worked on trying to bring that down. In May, I know that they worked with people putting residents on payment plans and payment arrangements. In August, we started doing shutoffs again. So that has helped bring that number down. People who are in need, we still direct them to St. Vincent de Paul. And also we got word from Clackamas County that they have a program that's going online for us next month that we're doing the paperwork to be a part of for that. So that's another avenue that folks can reach out to.
It's an online utility assistance program?
I don't know if it's online, but it's a county-based.
It's a utility assistance.
Utility-based assistance
Okay.
program, yes. So, yeah, staff has been working really hard on bringing that number down, and I think the 30% kind of shows.
And before he goes on from this part, I just want to call out how much work has actually been from a couple of key staff downstairs who have really spent the time and effort to get us this far along. These were people, many of them were in crisis, finding ways to support them making payments, whether that's getting them actual subsidized payments or helping them with payment plans, has taken a significant amount of work from, in particular, Joyce at our front desk. And I just wanted to thank her and Michael. But they've also been supported by Judy and by Cy and by Kelly in making this all happen. So it's taken a team, and I really appreciate it.
Can I ask a quick question? And this is just, I'm just curious, for anyone that's had water shut off, is there, and this might be too technical of a question, but is there any sort of like, in an emergency situation, they bring it back on? Like, I just know because, we're about to hit cold weather, or if there's a fire or anything like that. Does Milwaukie have something in place for those people that water shut off? I'm just curious.
No, it's a great question. I will say that when COVID hit, we literally did that. We went out, we sent everybody, we went to every house that was turned off. We turned everyone back on because we didn't want to have people out of water. We didn't know if this was hygiene, right? Washing of hands. We were really concerned that people wouldn't be able to be okay. So I have seen it go fast.
Sure.
We don't usually have a lot of people out at once.
Gotcha.
So it would not be difficult for us to send people out and have us turn their water back on somewhat quickly if there was an emergency, but I can't tell you how many hours.
Yeah, no worries. But I just was curious if it is something that's possible, but it sounds like yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Good. Awesome.
In the couple months I've been here, it's been on average about 7 people that get shut off each month.
Yeah.
And in a matter of an hour and a half, they can go back out there and turn the water back on.
Cool.
And I will say that some months when we're starting this, we start at 90 people who are getting turned off the next day. So that's when I say that we have a team that's really working to get those numbers down. Joyce is spending multiple phone calls trying to help people as much as she possibly can so that we don't have to go down the path. And I also, the utility crews have a really hard job, the ones who actually have to go out and do the turnoff. So I also just want to call out, it's really hard on them too. They don't like seeing people in pain, and they don't like seeing people in crisis. So it's really better for all of us if we can find solutions to this before we have to do the shut off. But once we get to the shut off, to get people back on, it's pretty fast.
Okay, moving along to franchise fees. I know that this is a new chart, so if anybody has any comments or ways to make it better,
I
let us know.
appreciate that you did it. I like it.
Judy did this, so she gets all the credit for that.
Okay, well, tell her thank you.
So franchise fees is kind of a 5-year comparison by each franchisee, I guess, of how much we've collected over the last 5 years. Kind of a couple things to note. One is what's an electric service supplier, which is something I just learned. I guess Precision Cast Parts can go out when they're a big entity and can go out and buy their own electricity out on the market. So that reflects their purchasing power, I guess. The other thing I made a note of was for telecom in fiscal year 2022, there's a big decrease from 21, 760,000 down to 420,000. I'm looking into that. I don't have a perfect answer for it. I have a couple theories, but I don't want to delve into them here, but I'll follow up on that and let you know.
And so these numbers are what they actually paid, or
We collected.
what we collected. Okay. I mean, we've had an issue before with some of them not paying what we think they owe under and that issue persists.
Yeah, actually, this last month, we had another one that we're now looking into and trying to investigate just why we're receiving certain payment amounts versus what we had been making previously. There are changing laws right now, so it's also us trying to make sure that they're coinciding with those changes instead of being above and beyond what they should be reducing if there is a reduction.
Changing laws at the federal level?
Yeah. So trying to figure out 5G is definitely a part of this discussion, but there's a change in I'm gonna get this wrong, so I'm not gonna go into too much depth. When one of our previous employees was here, we knew that there was going to be a state case as well. And that state case did lead to Beaverton having to make additional payments as well as the city of Milwaukie, or reductions as well as the city of Milwaukie.
Right.
So I'll be honest, once we have a new finance director and the team is loaded, we can spend more time looking at this. But for right now, we're just trying to make sure we don't accidentally accept payments that are lower than they should be without having the conversation with an attorney. So that's what we're doing to date, and then we'll have more information in the coming months.
So just to be clear, this chart is tracking the actual revenues, not what we budgeted from those entities.
Right. It's actual money.
I think
collected.
that's what the discussion that Ann's talking about. Our budget always had Comcast way higher, and they weren't paying it.
Right.
But these are the actual revenues.
These are the actual revenues
Okay,
collected.
thank you.
And you can kind of see in Comcast where in 2018 it was 262,000 and this kind of dipped a little bit.
Tell Judy, great work.
Next page is staffing levels. So overall, I think the city is pretty well staffed, but there are a couple vacancies. One's currently in the city manager budget for a behavioral and houseless specialist position, which I believe that they're pretty close to hiring.
Oh, we've hired. They will be starting on the day after Thanksgiving break. So we're really excited. I'm not going to say their name. I don't know if they've told their colleagues yet. But we do have a person. We're really excited about them. They've worked in the area for a long time and know both our houseless population as well as our officers really well. So it's a great connection, and we're also meeting next week with Clackamas County about the embedded houseless position, and that is also moving forward. So we're now at the phase of writing the interlocal agreement with the nonprofit agency and with the county to make sure that we're all in agreement about how that position will work within our building and structure. But I'm hoping that that'll be here in the new year.
What is that position again?
This is a houseless peer support position. So this is an individual who's actually going to go out and work with our houseless community to help them get services, access services, find support.
And they're going to be paid by Clackamas County, but working through us?
Yeah. So originally what was going to happen is we were going to share the cost of one position. And in conversations with Vahid Brown, who many of you know, we realized there was an opportunity. They could fully fund a houseless position, but they did not manage the behavioral health side of things at the county. So they couldn't fund that position, but they felt both were needed. So they agreed to pay the entirety of the houseless position if we would pay the entirety of the behavioral health position. And so that's how we're pairing these two individuals together. The budget also included a new vehicle that you all approved during the budget process, and that will help these individuals work through the needs of our community. The new behavior, actually both positions will be spending time at our library as well. So I just want to make sure it's clear to the community. They're working with the PD because that's who spends the most time with people in crisis in our community. But they're not the only ones. So these positions will be spending a significant amount of time at the library trying to support individuals who are coming through the library system as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Just a random question, but it caught my eye. Seasonal positions were not filled. We didn't hire any seasonal workers this year? We
Mary?
We couldn't find them.
couldn't find them. Okay.
It was a really hard year for all cities. Actually, NCPRD really struggled as well. You just couldn't find seasonal workers.
Wow. Okay. And then there's reference in here to an opioid settlement. That's the first I've heard of that. What's
And I will be honest, I should be spending more time on it. We are receiving, I think, our second payment at this point, and there are rules around how it can be spent. It can be spent in alignment with some of the mental health work that we're doing, which is why we accepted the funds instead of directing them to the county, because we think that it can be used by our new staff person. Once that person's on board, we're going to have them review how the funds can be spent and what their needs are to be able to support people in crisis in our community. If that's not the case, then we'll go back to the county and ask that we actually do an IGA with them to have them manage those funds. But it's very curtailed how you can spend it because it's all in response to what happened with prescription drug makers creating these drugs that then created the problem.
So we weren't really involved as litigants. It's just there was this national global settlement and this was our piece.
Yeah, and all the cities are receiving a certain percentage and share.
Okay, great.
So what you're saying is that it's constrained in terms of providing services related to drug addiction.
Correct. And things like Narcan or things like helping people get into substance abuse treatment. So there's a bunch of pieces that you can fund. Before this year, I would have said we shouldn't have these funds. They should go to the county because that's the primary provider. But with the new position, we think that there might be a nexus. So we're going to hold on to the funds, see if there's a good way for us to provide service to using them. And if not, we'll work with the county and transfer them.
And the amount is,
Do you remember?
Don't off the top of my head.
I can check for you, but it wasn't a ton of money, but it was enough that it was service support for our new person.
It's 12,000.
Yeah.
thank you.
Thank you.
That was quick.
Any other questions on staffing levels or FTE? Moving along. Next page is kind of helpful to me for finding out, forecasting when revenues are expected in the city. I know that property taxes are coming. Judy said that she got a little bit last week and a little bit this week, so they're starting to trickle in. Now's that time. Next page is, we move into the financials. So the fund balance at the end of September is 51.4 million. We can dig a little deeper into that. Some of you submitted questions over the last couple of days, so I'm hoping to incorporate them into as I go through this. But if there's something that I missed, just let me know and I'll answer. General fund. To highlight through here. I know there was one question on ARPA funds, if we were receiving any more, and we've received everything that we have received, so that's all of them. Property taxes are due in either Q2 of this fiscal year, and also licensing and permits and business registrations are starting up in December, so we should see those start to tick up. In the expenditures, we're in the first quarter of the biennium, so there's a lot of prepaid and a lot of yearly expenses that are come up that kind of elevate the expenses a little bit. Something that you'll notice. I think also David had the question of in the police department, there was an increase from 300,000 from the previous year in expenses, and he was wondering what a little bit of that was. Personnel cost increase, police equipment and purchases, and a little bit of educational training In 2021, there wasn't much training going on during that time. So to move forward to now, there's been a big jump in that in the last year.
So does that include the body worn cameras? That's part of that increase? Yeah.
That is.
Well, and the $300,000 increase would include that.
I have radios, tasers, and body cam, some body
Yep,
cams.
it should.
Awesome.
Yeah, and those are all purchased, all the equipment's in. So that would make sense.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Oh, and by the way, to anyone who's wondering, those have been wonderful. The body worn cams are working really well, both for community members and for our officers. And I just really appreciate the investment from this team and from council in finding a way to make that possible.
Are they fully deployed now? Or are they still on a pilot?
I
kind
think
of
they're
thing?
pretty fully deployed.
Okay.
I can't say that we're not still in that grace period where people are learning how to turn them on and off and making sure that it's all working correctly, but I do really appreciate having them. They've been very helpful.
I have a question about
Sure.
them now that we're talking about body cams. My recollection is that when we discussed doing that, there was something about how the city would have a website, an interactive website. Is that happening?
I don't know if that is happening, in part because it outed some community member information if we did it that way. And so we were a little cautious about going through that process, but I'm happy to talk to the chief and get you an answer.
Okay.
You mean a website that was going to have the video on it?
No, there was going to be a website that would actually locate incidents. And there was, at one point, I don't think I'm misremembering this, the idea that people who saw things in the neighborhood could interact with that website. So I would
find out.
I don't understand, I was very intrigued by the idea, and so I would like
I
to find
recall
out.
that.
Pardon?
I recall hearing that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was in our slide deck. I remember seeing the map. So let me get you a response.
Okay, thank you.
Moving forward to the next page, City Hall
What
Fund.
page are you on?
I am on page 14.
Okay. Always helpful for
Sorry, can I,
us old people.
Yeah.
one
please.
more clarification? On the non-departmental
Yes.
portion,
The non,
just because that one jumped up.
yes. So the big ones for that is insurance premium costs.
Gotcha.
Insurance premiums jumped almost 70,000 for the year last year. And the other half is the debt service fund for funding the new city hall.
Got it. Awesome.
And for those of you who don't know how we calculate the insurance rates, just real fast, it's based on 5 years worth of data as well. So what kind of insurance payouts have we had? And I'm looking at Mary so she can correct me if I get this wrong. We did have a couple of situations where we had higher payouts. So those will now stay with us over the course of the 5 years. So we can expect them to stay higher for a little while just based on a couple of incidences.
Gotcha.
Oh, and the world has changed. So insurance rates have also changed.
Thank you.
So we have the new city hall, I think they're preparing work to start in January 2023, with us tentatively moving in September-ish at that point. Debt service fund, I think we're just funding the first quarter balances for that. No big change there. Next page, 16, the building fund. There was an increase in fee related to new residential and commercial developments. These were the Monroe and Kellogg Bowl buildings. Not sure if there's different terms for those. But that was for the big increase. As far as the expense, we're going to a new computer software in December, GovBuilt. And that was the upfront costs, kind of get that up and running for that software. Next page, construction excise tax. Again, just the new developments is responsible for the increase in revenue. We are looking to make state payouts in March of 2023. So I think that we'll have money flowing out from that fund. Next page is transportation fund. As I noted earlier, the local state and gas tax are 3% lower than past year or past quarter and are kind of trending downward, I think. Something to keep note. Also, county vehicle registration, we just received a check for September for $32,000 for that. There's a 2-month lag in that process, but I think the revenues are kind of what we projected. Any questions with transportation? Now moving forward to the city funds. The water fund, not too much activity with that. In here, you'll see where the LGIP interest rate calculation, I guess to call it, is kind of plays a factor in this, is that we budgeted for a 1% interest income, and as of June, the end of June, it was 0.93, so it was below what we projected it would be. So we had to issue the difference at year end, which is a negative, which is an expense. So that's unusual, but the rates turned around in June. And as I said before, as of today, they're 2.85, so they're pretty healthy. So that revenue will show in the first quarter or in the next quarter of the fiscal year.
What line item are you talking about? I'm lost.
Oh, I'm just talking about in general. I'm on the water fund, note number 1.
Page 23.
Yeah.
Page 22, 23.
Oh, okay.
So if you're saying we budgeted expecting X from LGIP, it came in a little lower. And so we showed that balance as a expense.
Yes.
And now we're going to make more. So will we take away that expense?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
It's just where the rate was as of that date. And as of that date, it was lower than what we thought, but it's shot back up healthy. So you'll see that negative expense come back as revenue, kind of.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yes.
Okay.
As long as we don't make it back to you.
Wastewater fund, just to kind of highlight the remaining obligated funds in there is the completion of the Home Avenue and Wood Avenue improvements, which I think will be coming out in the next quarter. He's pulled out of also stormwater as well. On to page 28. System development charges.
I have to get on my soapbox one more time here on the utility funds and just question whether we've ever considered giving money back to the ratepayers when we have excess cash balances, which we're now up to almost 18 million between these 3 funds. We typically spend less. The revenues come in pretty close to what we budget. We spend less. That leads to cash balances. Then on our capital outlays, we don't spend. So the utility fund balances just continue to go up. So that ratepayer money is being invested at 2% or 3% or whatever the LGIP rate is. utility ratepayers may have credit card balances at 13, 14%. It doesn't seem right to me, but the rest of the council may, or the committee may say, well, that's fine. Have we ever considered a mechanism to give the money back?
Yes. So actually, John, I would say that your concerns get discussed regularly at this point with both the public works director and the assistant city manager and the engineering director. And Michael's been in some of those conversations lately as we've been trying to figure out how we make sure that we're right scoping the rate. There's a couple of things in here that are unique this year. I know that not every year is unique, and you and I have had this conversation every year. So I respect that. One of the issues that's coming up is our stormwater projects are about to go live in a way that will deplete that fund very quickly. So the Meek Street project that we've talked about for several years, we couldn't get through the railroad, has finally been approved by the railroad. And that means that we'll end up expending several million out of that fund balance that we have not been able to expend for quite some time. And I believe that one is at least 4.5 million of the fund balance in that location. But there's another 2 projects in there that are now being moved around to expend an additional, I believe, 2 million out of the stormwater fund. So I actually encourage you to keep saying it. And this council and this board should have this discussion. And I fully support that ongoing conversation. And if you want to have that discussion tonight, I support it. But I did want to let you know that you have actually had a pretty big impact in what we're talking about right now in the staff level discussion, and that there is one nuance that I needed to bring up for tonight.
So if we have excess, we'd have to look at the CIP, right? We have to look at the rest of the biennium and what we're going to spend in the CIP to really know if it's excess. But
all I know is that the balances just keep going up.
yeah.
And we hear that, oh, we're going to spend the money, but I've been at this for 10 years and we're not spending the money.
Yeah.
And you're taking money from ratepayers that they could be using. So maybe the next period you don't raise rates.
Well, that's what that's where I was
Keep
kind
raising
of
rates. What for?
going is, should we be, I guess when you first asked it, I was thinking you were asking about like a rebate or something, but the better
That could be explored. We're talking about the Innovative Climate Fund here. Why don't we do some innovative utility rate making?
Yeah.
Well, and I do think that this year in particular for the water fund, we didn't increase rates because we had moved it was the ARPA money that we were unexpectedly given into projects for the water department that negated the need to increase the rates. So there are places where we have been trying to find ways to not increase. Yeah. But I would rather have Kelly Brooks here for this conversation, if I'm really blunt, just to make sure that I'm actually not undercutting projects that she knows are moving on the CIP. And I think she's more eloquent on this, but we can actually calendar this item for the next meeting if you'd like to have this discussion with the new council president.
I don't necessarily think that we need to have a discussion, at least until I can see something that shows what has happened. And it does seem to me like part of the balances being high has to do with COVID, and we didn't do a lot of construction. So I would be interested in something that showed, that what the effects were about why it didn't get. And now 10 years, that obviously goes back before COVID. So I am interested in that too.
I agree 100%. I do believe for COVID in particular, we saw it at about a year of construction time for what we had projected for the new SAFE program when we started that program. That's why we're letting the debt today instead of 9 or 10 months ago, when we thought that we would be letting the debt. But I think it's a fair statement that's being made by Board Member Stoll, which is we always have these big dreams that we're gonna deliver more projects than we're able to deliver. And I think he's just seeing that the speed at which we're able to deliver is below the margin of growth that we have in our utility rates. I just want to make sure that the individuals who are on the ground, seeing the projects have a chance to be a part of the discussion. And that would be really Peter Passarelli, Steve Adams, and Kelly Brooks. So I don't need to, if you all don't want to have this conversation here, I don't need to, but I do think it's a good conversation. And I think it's always important to make sure that we're spending our dollars wisely. And if we're not, then we need to have dialogue around whether or not there needs to be a year of passing the increased rate.
Yeah, and actually, if I may, thank you for bringing that up. Because I think about a month ago, Ann and I had that conversation, and one of our check-ins was, if these projects weren't moving forward, then why don't we take that money and give it back to the ratepayers and decrease the rates? We've had that conversation. And then I think not too long after that, it was brought to my attention that those projects were moving forward. But yes, I am in favor of looking at that as well, just to make that clear. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, to your point, I think there's an inherent bias in the budget process to over-collect money. That's all I'm trying to point out, really.
Absolutely. And I think that's the job of the budget committee, is to have this discussion with me, and I appreciate it. I just want to make sure that we're seeing the same things, and that means that I need staff to spend some time looking at trend lines and figure out if we're doing this consistently, and are we really a year ahead on increases? Is that what's going on? Is if you waited a year, you would actually right scope the budget to the delivery time? I don't know. But I'd like to have that conversation with staff here and give them a chance to talk about it.
And I think it's a good conversation to have with two new council members coming on, because, not to wait, not to backload everything till the budget cycle, to sort of start thinking about these things now, even though we're not bouncing up against the budget cycle or whatever.
Absolutely. It takes time. And this way, if we decide things, we can actually build it into the next fall, which is really the timing that we would need it for the budget cycle. The other piece of this that I do just want to make sure I say, we are really low actually on our transportation dollars that we need in order to construct the SAFE projects. So we are down, I believe, with contracted funding, we're down below $800,000, which for us is actually starting to cut it close. You don't have another project that is equal to that. They're all higher than that amount, which is why we're coming forward. So as I'm saying this on some of our utility funds, I actually believe in our transportation fund, we are at the point that if we don't get additional funding, we will have to start slowing down staffing and some other things in order to make sure that we don't spend money we don't have. But I do think for storm and for water and for waste, this is probably a really important conversation. So thank you.
Can I ask a quick question on that? And forgive my lack of knowledge on how all of the earmarked funds or the funds work on this. In a dire situation, Lady mentioned with the transportation fund and the utility fund, is there mechanisms in place to transfer from those to another or no?
Nope.
So utility fund is utility, transportation is transportation. Got it.
Yeah, and one of the things that we're expecting.
Enterprise
Yeah,
funds.
okay.
What one of the things that we've realized over the last year, and council's actually going to address one of these tomorrow night, but we have old ordinances that don't make it exceptionally clear how we bracket that money to make sure we're not misusing it based on the utility, right? So making sure that when we say it's spent on water, it's spent on these things, this is what counts as water. So we haven't looked at it since the 80s. So next year, I'm expecting we're going to have discussions around at least a couple of those ordinances, just to make sure that those are tight, that we're actually being really clear. What we're budgeting is what's in the ordinance, which is the following things. Tomorrow night, the example I'm giving is that the council recently gave us direction that more money towards the urban forestry program counts towards the stormwater money, because you can actually show that water cleaning occurs using trees, and that equals a better, it helps us achieve our MS4 permit in the stormwater department. So all of that just needs to be spelled out, so it's really clear that it can be natural and man-made environments that help us reach that MS4 permit, and we can invest in both as long as the outcome is that the MS4 permit is reached.
The what permit?
It's the water quality permit. that we are by the state and by the federal government required to meet. It's our total daily maximum load is another one that we're trying to make sure that we're actually containing how much water, releasing it at the right rate so we're not causing degradation into our waterways, as well as making sure that the types of things in our water don't cause further harm. So you can only have so much of certain things in your water. We need to make sure that that is lower, that is cleaned using trees. It's also cleaned using bioswales and other things that we've been doing for a long time. But we just want to make sure it's really clean and clear in our ordinances that we're right scoping those. So you'll see those over the next couple of years. It's a great question.
Awesome, thank you.
Yep.
All right, and wrapping up the packet is the project status reports, kind of everything. We asked everybody to give CIP updates, and those are all in the back, and you can review at your leisure. And if you have questions, feel free to email me and I can pass them along to the appropriate staff. Are there any questions?
No, anybody have any questions? Anybody want to discuss anything further? If not, we have any other items that somebody wants to raise?
I have one that I just wanted to make sure was clear to anyone watching tonight and for our minutes that both the mayor and Council President Heisey were excused from tonight's meeting.
I didn't hear you. What?
Sorry, the mayor and Council President Heisey, as well as Cassie? Kaylee, thank you. We're all excused from the meeting tonight. I didn't know if that had been said on air.
Yeah, okay, thank you. Okay, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
There's a motion to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Anyone not in favor? This meeting is hereby adjourned.